What if the man who thought he controlled every victim suddenly learned someone else was inside his machine? That question echoed through Ethan's mind as he watched the remote session flicker alive, the cursor trembling like it sensed danger. He kept his breath steady, letting Rex believe the scam was working, while beneath the surface a mirrored tunnel opened straight into the call center. Lines of code shifted like shadows in a narrow alley, each one a step closer to the moment Rex would lose everything. Ethan whispered nothing, made no sound, only guided the trap with a calm precision that masked the pulse hammering in his chest. When the scammer demanded access to his fake bank account, Ethan knew he had him, because the instant Rex clicked the wrong path, the mirrored feed revealed the cluttered office behind him, the noise of headsets, the cheap fluorescent glow. For the first time, Ethan saw the man he planned to break. Ethan kept his breathing even as the scammer rambled through his script, stretching each lie like old gum. The mirrored feed stabilized, revealing every inch of the call center with chilling clarity. He watched workers shift between smirks and monotone greetings, oblivious to the silent intruder studying their world. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, but his hands stayed steady, tracing pathways through folders Rex didn't know could be seen. Each click revealed more rot, victim logs, dollar amounts, recordings labeled with careless cruelty. Ethan felt no triumph, only a cold obligation. He wasn't here to toy with Rex. He was here to dismantle him. And as Rex demanded he log into his bank, Ethan realized the scammer's confidence might be his greatest vulnerability. Rex's tone sharpened as he pushed Ethan toward the fake banking portal, his voice shifting from polite insistence to thinly veiled impatience. Ethan let him speak, all while navigating deeper into directories Rex didn't realize were shared. The call center noise pulsed like a restless hive, chairs scraping, keyboards clacking, distant arguments over quotas. Each sound painted a clearer picture of the machine Rex served. Ethan noted every detail, each clue forming a map of operations that stretched far beyond this one man. He needed leverage, something powerful enough to break the illusion of control Rex wielded over countless victims. And then he found it, a privileged access tool buried in a folder Rex clearly wasn't supposed to use. It was the key to the machine's spine, and the first step toward shutting it all down. Ethan could feel the shift the moment he opened the hidden tool. The mirrored screen emitted a faint pulse of light as command prompts unfolded like secret doors into Rex's system. He sensed the vulnerability beneath the scammer's facade, a fragile architecture built on stolen trust. Rex kept pushing, demanding bank access, demanding urgency, demanding fear. Anything that made victims compliant. But Ethan wasn't a victim. He was an adversary Rex couldn't yet comprehend. The SYSKEY module appeared like a loaded weapon left carelessly in a drawer. Ethan didn't touch it, not yet. He wanted to understand the battlefield first, to map every escape route Rex might try when panic arrived. The calm before chaos had never felt so heavy. Rex leaned forward with a confidence he hadn't earned, lecturing Ethan about bank security while scanning his screen for signs of compliance. He didn't notice the mirrored tunnel widening, didn't sense the silent presence prowling through his files. Ethan tracked processes, system behaviors, anything that could reveal how deeply the call center's network was intent. His plan wasn't reckless, it was surgical. Locking Rex out would be satisfying, yes, but Ethan wanted something more meaningful, a blueprint of the entire operation. He listened to the scammer's rising impatience like a distant storm, knowing each second brought him closer to the moment he would flip the balance of control. He just needed one more opening. Ethan watched the call center unfold like a corrupted ecosystem, each workstation a small island of deceit, humming under cheap lights. Rex strutted through his script with false authority, unaware that Ethan drifted through his directories with growing precision. Victim spreadsheets flickered open, rows of names and losses forming a silent graveyard of stolen trust. Ethan felt a tightening in his chest, not anger but something colder, I need to expose the full extent of what these people had built. Marcus's voice echoed faintly in his memory, urging caution, but the window of opportunity widened with each careless click Rex made. Ethan sensed momentum shifting in his favor, like a tide pulling answers from the shore. He was no longer just observing the nest. He was navigating its pathways with a hunter's patience, gathering the evidence that could collapse it from within. Rex's voice bounced through the headset, ordering Ethan to perform pointless steps meant to confuse victims, but Ethan barely listened. His attention tunneled into a deeper directory stamped with timestamps and cryptic labels. The mirrored screen revealed more than he expected: screen shares of past scams, audio recordings cataloged with chilling indifference, even scripts prompting operators on how to fake empathy. Ethan's breath slowed as he clicked through their trophies of manipulation. This wasn't petty greed, it was industrialized exploitation. He pictured the director somewhere behind it all, a ghost pulling wires through frightened communities. Ethan felt Marcus's stinted vice pressing against the back of his mind, but the desire to cut deeper overpowered caution. Every file he opened illuminated another hidden limb of their network. The mirrored feed widened unexpectedly, revealing a doorway behind Rex where operators drifted in and out like restless shadows. Among them, Ethan noticed a figure moving differently. Priya. She spoke softly to a caller, her expression tense but sincere, a stark contrast to the rehearsed performances around her. Ethan watched her shoulders tighten whenever Rex barked orders, watched her flinch when co-workers laughed at distressed victims. She looked trapped, not complicit. Something in her posture told Ethan she despised the place but had nowhere else to go. He didn't know her story, but he recognized the subtle defiance in her gestures. She could be an ally or a liability, and either path could shift the entire operation. Ethan leaned closer, studying the moment as if reading a coded message hidden in plain sight. Ethan slipped past user folders and into the system logs, discovering activity patterns that stretched beyond typical scam operations. Schedule rotations, payout routes, and encrypted archives hinted at a far more coordinated organization. This wasn't a rogue call center. It was a spoke in a larger wheel, polished and protected by people who knew how to cover tracks. Rex, for all his bluster, was merely a loud cog, grinding in predictable rhythm. Ethan felt the weight of his discovery settle heavily. He had hoped for proof. Now he had structure, hierarchy, method. The deeper he traced, the clearer it became. Someone above Rex controlled everything with chilling precision. The director wasn't just a rumor, he was the architect, and Ethan had just found his blueprint. Rex ramped up the pressure, voice rising with irritated urgency as he instructed Ethan to cooperate with the banking steps. Ethan let him rant, his attention fixed on a discovery tucked deep in a restricted folder. A hidden directory labeled with initials matching the director. Inside were encrypted spreadsheets, password lists, routing data, evidence that transcended petty scams. Ethan felt a jolt of adrenaline pulse through him. This was the core, the nerve center they never intended anyone to see. He copied file paths, memorized access points, knowing he was brushing against danger most investigators never reached. Rex snapped again, demanding compliance, but Ethan barely heard him. The real battle wasn't between them anymore. It was between Ethan and the unseen force, orchestrating everything from the shadows. Ethan felt the tempo of the call center shift, a subtle tightening in the air as Rex's tone sharpened across the mirrored audio feed. His instructions grew harsher, slipping from fake politeness into thinly veiled hostility, each demand revealing the stress building beneath his slick persona. Ethan followed the sound while drifting deeper into the system backbone, tracing connections that linked Rex's workstation to others in the office. Lines of digital authority stretched outward like tangled nerves, all leading to a command node he hadn't noticed before. He paused, letting the realization settle. This wasn't just a workstation, it was a control hub disguised as ordinary equipment. Someone had built a layered structure around Rex to keep oversight invisible. The director's presence pulsed from the shadows of the server tree, unseen but unmistakable, and Ethan understood that striking Rex alone wouldn't be enough. Rex demanded immediate access to Ethan's supposed bank account, his voice cracking slightly as he attempted to reassert control. But Ethan watched something else. Priya. Her expression tightened whenever Rex snapped at a coworker, and she flinched when he slammed his mouse against the desk in frustration. She muttered reassurances to callers that didn't match the predatory script on her screen. Ethan tracked small details, the way her eyes darted to hidden corners of her monitor, the hesitation before she read certain lines, as if she were resisting the system from within. She wasn't part of the facade. She was surviving it. Ethan leaned closer, considering how her presence might alter his strategy. If she sensed the operation's collapse before it happened, she might warn others, or save herself in ways that complicated everything he planned. As Ethan tunneled into the next layer of the network, he discovered folders Rex had no business accessing, protected by permissions that should have locked him out. But someone higher in the chain had left the gates ajar, and Ethan slipped through the cracks like water through fractured stone. These files didn't track victims. They documented internal punishments, quotas, and operator rankings that exposed the call center's ruthlessness. He read notes about coercion, disguised as motivation, threats hidden beneath corporate language, and subtle references to those who failed to meet standards. The pattern painted a grim picture. People weren't just working. Here, they were trapped. Ethan felt the weight of their desperation pressing through each entry. Priya wasn't merely uncomfortable. She was caught in a machine designed to silence dissent. Ethan's search drove him into a hidden location on the mirrored drive, where encrypted reports waited behind layers of sloppy protection. He bypassed each measure with precise keystrokes, peeling back the digital armor until the contents revealed themselves in stark clarity. These documents mapped the organization's structure, roles, payouts, operator rotations, down to supervisor schedules marked with cold efficiency. The director's initials appeared like a signature across the files, confirming what Ethan suspected. This wasn't a scattered scam outfit, but a multi-tiered enterprise built on fear, discipline, and manipulation. Rex was nothing more than a loud sentinel guarding a darker truth. Ethan leaned back for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what he'd uncovered. Taking down a single operator wouldn't dismantle this network. He had to sever its spine. Rex pushed harder, his voice cracking with impatience as he demanded Ethan read out banking details. Ethan barely registered the noise, his mind locked onto a new discovery, nestled deep inside a misnamed folder. A direct link to the director's private access panel. The interface was primitive but powerful. An oversight console capable of controlling every machine in the room. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline cut through him. This was the gateway he needed. The opening that turned a simple sting into a complete infiltration. He traced command strings, memorizing pathways that could bring the entire operation to its knees with a single decisive strike. Rex's voice rose again, accusing, demanding, frantic, but the balance of power had already shifted. Ethan wasn't reacting anymore. He was orchestrating. Ethan felt the system's architecture open before him like a labyrinth carved from someone else's arrogance. He scanned the director's oversight panel, noting every command string with the care of a surgeon, preparing for a dangerous incision. Rex barked instructions in the background, unaware that the balance had shifted so far that nothing he demanded mattered anymore. Ethan hovered over the SYSKEY module, its presence humming like a live wire waiting to be touched. But he hesitated, not out of fear, but calculation. Triggering it now would cripple Rex, yes, but it would also alert the director, and that risk could cost Ethan the bigger prize. He needed timing, precision, and complete visibility. The call center around Rex crackled with tension, and Ethan sensed the moment of collapse approaching like an oncoming storm. Rex paced behind his workstation, muttering curses under his breath as Ethan's supposed bank hesitation dragged on longer than he liked. His irritation turned sharp, slicing through the noisy call center like a blade. Ethan tracked his every movement through the mirrored feed, noting how coworkers flinched when Rex passed their desks. Priya's eyes followed him too, not with fear alone, but with a restrained fury that lingered at the corner of her gaze. She typed slowly, her shoulders stiff, her voice soft as she soothed a caller with genuine compassion. Ethan realized she wasn't just resisting. She was fighting her own war in silence. He wondered how long she had survived under the director's rule, and whether crippling the system might free her or put her in greater danger. Strategy now required empathy. Ethan explored deeper nodes in the director's private console, uncovering logs that documented disciplinary actions, operator surveillance, and detailed reports on performance metrics, enforced with unnerving precision. It became clear that the call center thrived on coercion as much as theft. Some operators were punished for hesitating, others for empathy. Priya's discomfort suddenly took on a sharper meaning. She wasn't just misplaced. She was endangered. Ethan felt a wave of responsibility wash over him. A blunt attack might send Rex into a frenzy that the director could use as justification to purge dissenters. Ethan had to decide whether he was there to punish or to protect. The answer shaped his next moves: isolate Rex, preserve Priya, and take the director by surprise. Precision over spectacle. Ethan constructed a layered plan in seconds, the blueprint unfolding across his monitors like a quiet revelation. First, he would sever Rex access and lock him out with SYSKEY. Then, while confusion erupted, he would siphon encrypted archives from the director's node before anyone realized an outsider had penetrated the network's heart. Marcus's warnings echoed faintly in his memory, urging him not to push too far, but those boundaries no longer held meaning. Ethan wasn't reacting to the scammer anymore. He was dismantling a system of exploitation built to thrive on human vulnerability. The mirrored cursor traced lines through the network map, highlighting pathways to deeper authority. Ethan took a slow breath. Every keystroke from here would shape the downfall of the entire structure. Rex leaned forward in his chair, frustration turning into open hostility as he threatened to end the session unless Ethan complied. His voice cracked, revealing fear buried beneath the bluster. Ethan watched him with cold clarity, the mirrored feed capturing every flicker of panic creeping into his posture. The SYSKEY command shimmered on Ethan's screen, ready to ignite. But this moment required more than anger. It needed purpose. Ethan positioned his cursor over the trigger, eyes locked onto Rex's trembling hands. The timing had to be perfect. Strike while Rex believed he held total authority, while the director's attention was elsewhere, while Priya remained unnoticed in her quiet rebellion. Ethan exhaled slowly, steadying his heartbeat. The moment to act was coming, and once it began, there would be no return. The moment Ethan initiated the SYSKEY sequence, the mirrored feed flickered like a dying flame, then stabilized into a perfect stillness that signaled the trap was locked. Rex kept shouting instructions, unaware that the heartbeat of his machine had already begun to slow. Ethan watched the process bar creep forward, each percent a countdown toward chaos. The call center noise continued in its usual discordant rhythm, phones ringing, operators muttering through scripts, keyboards clacking, until Rex's monitor froze mid-command. His voice cracked mid-sentence. Ethan leaned back, letting the silence settle around him like a storm forming in the distance. The SYSKEY window replaced Rex's script in an abrupt flash, demanding a password no one possessed. Ethan felt the shift ripple across the room through the mirrored feed as confusion turned into dread. The collapse had begun. Rex stared at the frozen monitor, blinking rapidly as if his disbelief could somehow make the system obey again. His hand trembled over the mouse, clicking futilely at an unresponsive screen. Operators nearby exchanged confused glances, whispers rising like the first sparks of a wildfire. Ethan observed every second from his apartment, the mirrored feed capturing Rex's face, as panic slowly replaced authority. Rex yanked off his headset and slammed it onto the desk, demanding to know who touched his machine, accusing everyone in sight. No one answered. The call center's energy shifted from mechanical efficiency to swirling chaos. Ethan recognized the look in Rex's eyes, the dawning realization that his control had evaporated in an instant. Replaced by fear he could no longer hide. The uproar spread across the call center as workers noticed Rex's meltdown, their screens reflecting the alarm etched across his posture. Priya paused, mid-sentence with a caller, her gaze lifting toward the disturbance as Rex shouted threats at anyone within reach. Ethan watched her expression shift from concern to careful calculation, as though she sensed something larger unfolding beneath the panic. She stood slowly, the tension in her shoulders revealing that she had seen men like Rex lose control before. But this time, the collapse wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed at the structure that held her captive. Ethan felt a surge of vindication mixed with an unexpected hope. The chaos he triggered wasn't just punishment, it was opportunity, and Priya knew it even before she understood its cause. The director's door burst open with violent force, sending a ripple of silence across the call floor. Ethan leaned closer to the mirrored feed, though the camera angle gave only a limited view of the imposing figure storming toward Rex. The director's presence radiated fury, each step echoing authority sharpened by fear of exposure. He barked questions at Rex, who stumbled through explanations, pointing wildly at the locked machine. Ethan watched the confrontation unfold like a stage play of collapsing power. The director grabbed Rex's monitor, shaking it as though the physical gesture could undo the digital prison Ethan had locked them into. Operators shrank back, Priya included, her eyes fixed on the unfolding conflict with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Ethan timed his next move with precision. While they fought, he siphoned the director's hidden files. Amid the turmoil, Ethan executed the second phase of his plan, initiating a covert download of the director's encrypted archives, while the mirrored feed captured every frantic gesture in the office. The torrent of files streamed across Ethan's monitor, routing documents, export lists, hidden transaction logs, each one a nail in the coffin of the entire operation. Rex shouted into the void as if yelling could reverse the lockout, while the director's rage spiraled into whispered threats that sent shivers through nearby operators. Ethan remained silent, fingers gliding calmly across the keyboard as the final packets of data transferred. The storm he had unleashed was now fully formed, tearing at the fragile chain of command in the room. And with the evidence secured, Ethan felt the weight of decision lift. The downfall was irreversible. Ethan waited for the chaos to peak before triggering the final payload, a silent message embedded deep in the mirrored pathway. With a single keystroke, every monitor in the call center flickered, then ballooned into a stark white screen, carrying a pre-recorded warning that exposed their crimes in cold detail. Operators froze mid-sentence. Rex stumbled back, eyes wide as the words cut through the room like a blade. Priya covered her mouth, not in guilt but in shock, realizing someone had finally struck back. The director spun toward the nearest terminal, barking orders, but the command tree had already been severed. Ethan watched the collapse unfold with steady breaths, knowing he had created something bigger than a simple lockout. He had ignited truth in a place built on lies, and the flame was spreading fast. Panic rippled outward as operators scrambled to hide evidence, yank cables, or plead innocence to no one in particular. Rex yelled over them all, his voice cracking under the pressure, desperately insisting he had nothing to do with the breach. Priya moved in the opposite direction, stepping away from her station with quiet purpose. She glanced at the director, whose fury pulsed like a storm barely contained behind rigid posture. Ethan followed her every movement, watching calm bloom where fear once lived. She seemed to understand that the walls were finally collapsing, and that survival required clarity, not chaos. Ethan tightened his grip on the mouse, tracking her path through the mirrored feed. He couldn't intervene directly, but he could protect her indirectly. By accelerating the downfall now consuming the room, the director shoved past operators, ripping the cable from Rex's tower with a sharp twist, but the gesture did nothing. The infection had already spread through every node. Ethan watched his frantic attempts to regain control with detached clarity. The mirrored feed displayed error after error, warnings cascading across the director's consoles like unstoppable waves. Rex pleaded with him, pointing wildly at the scrambled screens, but the director responded with a glare that silenced him instantly. Priya edged farther from the cluster, heart pounding visibly in her throat. Ethan sensed the turning point arriving, the moment when fear transformed into recklessness. He scanned the network one last time, ensuring the final broadcast remained stable. The authorities now had every file, every trace, every proof. All that remained was the collapse. Sirens wailed faintly through the director's office window, a distant tremor that sent immediate dread through everyone inside. Ethan listened to the mirrored audio as the entire call center fell into frantic whispers. Some operators rushed for the exits, others froze. While Rex stared toward the sound like a man awaiting judgment, Priya didn't run. Instead, she stepped aside, distancing herself from the director's shadow as if reclaiming the air around her. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Relief, maybe, or vindication. The chaos he'd unleashed had torn through layers of deceit and exposed the foundation beneath. The authorities were closing in with precision, answering the silent call Marcus had sent moments earlier. Ethan steadied himself, watching the final moments unfold like a storm, washing away everything rotten left standing. The mirrored feed trembled as the authorities reached the building, footsteps echoing against concrete hallways before bursting into the call center. Operators scattered in panic. The director shouted orders that no one followed. Rex backed against his desk, hands trembling, eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. Ethan watched the raid unfold with measured calm, each second confirming the downfall he had engineered from miles away. Officers stormed the floor, guiding workers aside, securing terminals, and isolating the director with swift efficiency. Priya stood still, hands raised slightly in cautious cooperation, her expression a swirl of fear and relief. Ethan leaned back, exhaling long and slow. The network, the lies, the entire machinery of exploitation had finally been severed at its core. His work here was done. Ethan remained still as the mirrored feed steadied into a final tableau of flashing lights, overturned chairs, and officers escorting operators away in silent lines. The chaos he'd orchestrated slowly dissolved into order, the kind enforced by consequences rather than fear. He watched Priya speak quietly to an officer, her posture calm but alert, as though she'd been waiting for this reckoning far longer than she realized. Rex, however, crumpled under the weight of his unraveling world, shouting fragments of excuses no one believed. Ethan let the silence of his apartment settle, the hum of his equipment fading into a gentle backdrop. He had walked a tightrope between justice and retaliation, but the outcome was undeniable. The network lay exposed. The director, the heart of the machinery, was finally cornered. Rex's breakdown grew more frantic as officers pressed him for answers. He gestured wildly at cables, at terminals, at the SYSKEY screen still locked in place. But every word only sank him deeper. The director tried to maintain composure, but the tightening ring of law enforcement made his authority crumble. Ethan watched the two men he'd targeted lose the illusions they'd worn like armor. And for the first time he saw the smallness beneath their cruelty. They were predators who had built empires on the fear of others, but now their power evaporated under real scrutiny. Ethan felt no triumph, only the sober clarity that justice rarely arrived clean. Still, watching their collapse offered a grim satisfaction, a sense that the scales had finally shifted back toward balance. Priya stood apart from the others as investigators guided her to a quieter corner, her hands clasped tightly, but her gaze steady. Ethan followed her through the mirrored feed until the connection began to falter under the pressure of the raid. He saw her speak with deliberate clarity, offering what she knew without the fear that once held her captive. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself a breath of relief. He hadn't known her, not truly, but he had sensed her humanity in a room built on deception. Now, she had a chance to step beyond the call center's grasp. As the feed dimmed, He glimpsed the faintest shift in her expression, something like hope. It was enough to make the weight on his shoulders ease, if only by a fraction. Ethan began the final task, erasing every trace of his involvement from the mirrored tunnels, logs, and local records. His fingers moved with precise rhythm, shutting down pathways, purging caches, and severing connections until only clean silence remained. He worked efficiently, not out of fear, but out of understanding. His role was never meant to be part of the official narrative. Marcus had drilled that principle into him from the beginning. When the last connection faded, the screen slipped into darkness, leaving only his reflection staring back. The apartment felt quieter than before, as though the electrical hum had grown softer once the tension dissipated. Ethan pushed his chair back and stretched, feeling the ache of hours spent holding his breath through every stage of the takedown. Hours later, footage from the local news streamed across Ethan's screen. Blurred shots of arrests, flashing lights, boxes of seized equipment. Rex appeared briefly in the background, slumped between officers, his swagger replaced with hollow defeat. The director followed, face obscured but posture unmistakably broken. Ethan watched without satisfaction or regret. He hadn't destroyed them for revenge. He'd dismantled a system built on preying upon the vulnerable. When the report ended, he closed the window and sat in stillness, listening to the soft hum of machines that no longer carried someone else's pain. A new day crept through the blinds, painting faint gold across his desk. He shut down the last monitor and whispered a thought meant for no one but himself. Another scam network would rise someday, and he would be waiting.